My drive through the haunted back roads revealed unbelievable terrors waiting in the dark. I never should have opened that door. It felt wrong the moment my fingers brushed against the cold metal handle. I'd heard the stories, of course. The locals spoke in hushed tones, their eyes wide, glossed over with a fear I didn't quite understand. They warned me about the back roads' twisted paths that snaked like dark veins through thick woods. No one traveled those roads after sunset. I shrugged off their warnings. I was just curious, right? A thrill seeker. The sun dipped below the horizon as I drove deeper into the shadows. A chill creeped in, seeping through the car windows and wrapping around my spine like a chilling embrace. The air smelled stale, a mix of damp earth and something far more sinister. I glanced in the rearview mirror, nothing but black behind me. Silence settled in. Then, it hit me, a low whisper, like a breeze carrying secrets, brushing my ears. I turned my head sharply, but there was nothing. Just the relentless trees closing in, their gnarled branches clawing at the night. I cranked the radio, hoping to drown out the whispers, but then the signals distorted. The music twisted into a cacophony of static mixed with some distant wailing. It sent shivers racing up my neck that I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white, the dread bubbling in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My eyes scanned the tree line, where shadows danced and flickered. I was sure I caught a glimpse of a figure darting just out of sight. My heart raced. I muttered to myself, convincing myself it was nothing. Just my imagination running wild. And then a loud bang. Something slammed against the side of my car. My breath caught in my throat. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching. I was suddenly enveloped in oppressive silence, the kind that weighs heavy, hanging thick in the air around me. That I peered out into the darkness, my pulse thundering in my ears. I felt utterly exposed, vulnerable. My hands trembled, and saltiness crept into my mouth. I could barely breathe. Then, more movement, a low rustling, followed by an unsettling crack of a branch breaking. Fear clawed at me as I turned on my headlights, cutting through the blanket of night. The beam illuminated the trees, revealing nothing but malice in their twisted shapes. I, too, was twisted, caught between skepticism and sheer terror. Just then, a shadow emerged from behind a thick trunk, a figure tall and cloaked in darkness. My heart dropped. Panic surged through my veins, igniting fight or flight. I could barely make out a face, but those eyes were fixated on me, penetrating. It felt like they were drawing every breath I took. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat, stuck somewhere between disbelief and horror. Everything went still. The world outside faded, and all that remained was that figure. I felt trapped in a surreal moment where time stretched on, then, a piercing shriek shattered the quiet. In my chest, my heart raced, ready to explode. Then, darkness fell. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness hung thick, almost palpable, as if it had weight and substance. I could feel it pressing down on me, wrapping me in its suffocating embrace. Panic clawed at my throat, and yet, all I could do was stare into the void where the figure had been. My heartbeat was the only sound cutting through the oppressive silence, loud and erratic, like a pounding drum heralding the approach of doom. What had I seen? Was it real? My mind spun in circles, wrestling with the strange amalgamation of fear and disbelief. I blinked hard, as if that alone could dispel the shadows encroaching upon my thoughts. But the whispering winds began anew, weaving through the trees, their sibilant tones spilling dark secrets I was unwilling to hear. Hands shaking, I fumbled for my phone, but the screen glimmered weakly, refusing to come to life. A dead zone, I thought with growing dread. I remembered the locals' warnings about this place, where the normal laws of the world seemed to wither. It was not a place meant for the living. Then, suddenly, the low growl of an engine broke the stillness, vibrating through my car. I felt a fleeting sense of hope. Maybe it was another traveler who could help me. My breath hitched as I glanced in the rearview mirror. A pair of headlights pierced through the darkened road behind me, not too far, but they seemed odd, almost too bright, cutting through the fog like knives. Only, as I peered closer, it sank in with a sickening jolt. The lights were too still, barely moving, hanging in place as if anchored by some unseen force. My heart dropped. I glanced back toward the source of that spine-chilling wail and, to my horror, the cloaked figure was gone, but the forest wasn't silent anymore. Low murmurs slithered like serpents through the trees, crawling under my skin and igniting a fire of hysteria in my veins. Was the figure still out there? Had it vanished back into the shadows to wait for me to lower my guard? I swallowed hard, grappling with the primal instinct to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The engine growled again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was closer now, reverberating deep in my chest. I felt an unbearable surge of dread. My car felt like a coffin, this dark cocoon stifling me, while the horror had no intention of letting me leave. Suddenly, the headlights flared brightly, illuminating the trees on both sides of the road, and in that blinding moment, I caught a chilling glimpse of something, a face staring back at me from the darkness. Not just the face, there were many faces, rising from the earth itself, twisted and contorted, emerging from the shadows to leer at me with hollow eyes filled with insatiable longing. My breath hastened as I backpedaled away from the window. I couldn't handle the pressing reality of those faces. Just as I thought I might scream, the headlights sputtered and died, plunging me back into enveloping darkness. I was utterly blind, both inside and out, but then came a soft tapping against my window, a tentative but relentless knock. My stomach twisted, and I froze, paralyzed by fear. It repeated, slow, deliberate. It felt like a countdown. My gaze darted rapidly around, searching for something, anything to hold on to. I clutched the steering wheel, the only thing keeping me tethered to sanity. And just when I thought I might tear away from this suffocating darkness, the tapping intensified, morphing into frantic scratching, clawing. Something was trying to get in, desperate to breach my fragile safety. An icy sweat broke out over my skin. How could I escape? With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I reached for the door handle, ready to abandon this metal cage of nightmares and confront whatever lay outside. But the moment my fingers brushed against it, a new terror awaited me. A voice, soft and sweet, yet dripping with malice, spoke right outside my window. "You shouldn't have come here," and that voice, chillingly familiar, sent shockwaves through my spine. It echoed not from the depths of the woods, but deep in my own mind. What had I done? I froze, unable to move, as the scratching escalated into a frenzy, a chaotic symphony of desperation. Then, a low growl echoed just beneath the whisper, igniting the primal instinct to scream, a sound clawing its way out of my throat, yet no sound escaped. I was trapped, ensnared by dread that twisted like a noose. The weight of the world bore down upon me as I heard the whisper again, closer now, almost beckoning. Let us in, and the scratching stopped at I, and the suffocating silence. Something new crept over me, not just fear, but the uncanny sensation of eyes, countless eyes, watching. I could feel them boring through the glass, unblinking. I'd never felt so utterly exposed. Then, unmistakably, the car's engine roared back to life, unbidden and violent. My heart surged with confusion and dread. And right before the headlights flickered back on, illuminating the faces in the trees, they were smiling that I was no longer in control. The vehicle lurched forward, the tires screaming as they gripped the earth, but I had no power over them. I was a passenger in a vehicle of my own demise, tearing deeper into the waiting darkness of the forest, the haunting chorus of whispers rising to a chilling crescendo as I hurtled toward the unknown. Before I could grasp what was happening, the road vanished beneath me, plunged into an abyss where the whispers turned to shrieks of elation, and shadows crept closer, closing in, hungry and gaping, and then I felt a temperature plummet, something cold and slick wrapping around my wrist like a vice. I screamed, finally breaking the silence, but it echoed empty and swallowed into nothing, as I was pulled into a world beyond comprehension. The air thickened as the screeching of tires surrendered to an ominous silence, an utter stillness that felt unnatural. The car shuddered and finally came to a halt, the headlights flickering violently before succumbing to the darkness once more. I sat frozen, adrenaline coursing through me like ice, painfully aware of the cold grip around my wrist. My heart thundered in my chest as I desperately pulled at the invisible weight binding me. The sensation wriggled around my skin, slick and alien, sending shockwaves of panic through my body. What is happening? I gasped, a plea mixing with a fervent urge to gasp for breath. Then, the whispers returned, sweet yet sinister. They dripped with seductive promises that twisted my resolve. Stay with us, join us, they seemed to echo from the trees, enticing and taunting, and I found myself glancing toward their source even as a darker instinct warned me to look away. Gradually, the pressure around my wrist slackened, and a slight flutter of hope washed over me. I blinked hard, and for a moment, my mind grasped at reason. I remembered the locals' warnings, the tales they told over crackling campfires, that those who ventured too deep into the woods were never seen again. The back roads were whispers of the lost, murmurs of souls snatched by the shadows. Suddenly, a fleeting shape darted past the window, too fast for me to identify. Darkness and movement melded into a grotesque shadow, and I could feel a primal sense of foreboding creeping back in. My instincts screamed for me to escape, but where? The engine quivered restlessly beneath me, as if sensing my turmoil, ready to heed any chance for survival. Yet my heart revolted against the very idea of moving. Then, there was a knock at the window, hard, deliberate, chillingly human. It froze me in place again. I dared not look, afraid of unveiling whatever horror awaited on the other side, but as the insistent knocking continued, a sickening urge curled in my gut. My body reacted before my mind could talk sense. I turned to the window. In an instant, I was met by an unsettling sight, a pale face peering back at me, its eyes wide and hollow, features contorted into a grotesque smile that seemed to mock my fear. The entity shifted, displaying a body that looked half decomposed, as if it had clawed its way out from beneath the earth itself. Its mouth moved, forming words I could not discern through the pounding in my ears. And then, just when a scream built in my throat, I noticed movement behind it. More figures appeared in the gloom, emerging from the shadows like ghoulish marionettes, swaying and crawling towards my car, faces twisted in rictus grins, mouths gaping open yet soundless. There was no denying their hunger. They pressed closer against the glass, and the car's interior turned cold, the glass fogging with my panicked breath. My heart raced as I fought the suffocating terror that threatened to overtake me. I realized then, I was encircled, held captive not just by fear, but by a growing realization that I had become a part of their world, their unspeakable desire. Let us, in the first figure said again, its voice eerily melodic, resonating deep within the fog of my mind, tempting me to succumb. Shaking, I reached for the door handle, driven by an instinct to run from this nightmare, run from whatever madness lay beyond. But just as my fingers brushed the handle, the muffled sounds of frantic breaths filled the car as the figures pressed their eyes against the glass, hungry shadows begging for entry. Then the car shifted again, lurching forward, snapping my attention back into a sharp focus. I had no control. The darkness outside deepened, and the shadows coalesced around me like a suffocating shroud. I was moving, pulled onward by forces unseen. Panic clawed at my chest. I fixed my gaze forward, half expecting to see welcoming headlights, but instead, I was met only by an encroaching abyss, an endless road snaking into the heart of night. The whispers transformed into a piercing cacophony, silhouettes writhed in the background, their shapes indistinguishable yet filled with palpable malevolence. Despite the overwhelming terror, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I would not give in. I grasped the steering wheel tight, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath, resisting the urge to cry out. I had to find a way. Then, with a sudden lurch, the car jolted to a stop once more, interrupted by a violent impact, like the jarring bone of fate knocking against wood. I opened my eyes just as shadowy figures flung themselves against the car, their claws scraping and clawing. A symphony of desperation and hunger echoed around me. One pair of inky eyes locked onto mine through the driver's side window, cold and void. They swallowed every ounce of light. "You can't hide forever," it hissed, its smile widening. "You belong to us now." The world outside warped as the shadows grew thicker, transforming from figures into a swirling mass of darkness ready to consume. My heart thundered as the whispers crescendoed, drowning out all sense, urging me to give in, to submit or become a part of the grotesque communion. And just when I thought the shadows might overwhelm me, the headlights flickered back to life, illuminating the chaos outside. The creatures recoiled in shock, revealing their true forms, deformed, half flesh, eyes bulging and mouths dripping with despair. In that moment of blinding light, I glimpsed something terrifying, a glimpse of the unmistakable truth, my own face reflected back at me amidst them, twisted and horrified. "Join us," they shrieked in unison as their claws clawed at the windshield, cracking the glass like brittle bone. In that instant, I realized that darkness did not want me to escape, it wanted me to become one of them. The weight of their hunger pressed down upon me like a stone, and as the glass shattered, spilling shards like glistening teeth, I felt my own scream drown in the swell of their insatiable chorus. And that's when I felt it, cold, vicious hands grabbing my shoulders from behind, dragging me into the beckoning blackness as I was swallowed into their realm of shadows. The last thing I saw was the flickering headlights fading into eternal night, and the creatures beginning to grin wider just before I disappeared. The breath that had once filled my lungs vanished in an instant, replaced by the icy grip of their hands pulling me backward into the abyss. The light from the car's headlights flickered weakly behind me, a mere whisper of hope fading with every inch I was dragged deeper into their realm. The things surrounding me were no longer mere figures but forms of malice, twisting and undulating with a hunger that seemed to reach out toward my very soul. That I could feel my skin crawl as I was enveloped. The sensations were thick and nauseating, as if I were being submerged in a viscous fluid that fed on despair. I thrashed and gasped, but the shadows twisted tighter around me, silencing my cries. My eyes darted wildly, searching for any sign of escape among the writhing masses. But the darkness was relentless, obscuring reality until all that remained was the suffocating thrumming of their hunger. "Welcome, little lamb," a voice crooned, chillingly sweet, as if tainted with honey. It resonated from all sides, surrounding me like a siren's call. I could not see its source, but I could feel its presence gliding closer, drawing nearer. The laughter that followed was a dissonant chorus of glee and madness, throbbing against the walls of my mind. "You've come to play with us, haven't you?" Their words slithered through my thoughts, twisting and turning, warping my sense of self. I fought against the seduction pulling me deeper, realizing the stories were real stories of those who were gobbled up by the whispering woods, transformed into something unrecognizable. I couldn't let that happen. In a moment of clarity, I summoned every ounce of strength within me. I pushed against their grasp, a primal scream bubbling up from the depths of my being. "No!" I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. "Get away from me!" A shockwave of energy coursed through the shadows as if my defiance had broken an invisible barrier. I felt their grip loosen slightly, and I seized the fleeting moment to wriggle free, hurling myself away from the entangling mass. I stumbled forward, the dark floor beneath me soft and shifting, and I raced blindly and breathlessly through the void. The cacophony swelled behind me, the creatures shrieking in rage and disbelief. Panic surged as I recognized I was not alone in this nightmare. The shadows were a swirling throng, each creature identical yet horrifyingly distinct from one another. A terrible realization once again pierced my mind. They were once like me, tortured reflections of lost souls that had fallen prey to the never-ending darkness. That I barely had time to process the fear clawing at my heart when a roar erupted from above, reverberating like thunder through the dimness. I looked up, and there it was, a massive, shadowy figure, its wings stretching ominously across the void, blocking what little light remained. The size of it was incomprehensible, an unholy sentinel patrolling this twisted domain. As panic blossomed again and I turned to run, the ground beneath me suddenly gave way, and I plummeted down an inky tunnel, my screams swallowed in the void. I flailed in the dark, my body twisting and tumbling as the whispers transformed into a heady madness. I couldn't tell how far I fell, nor where I would land. Suddenly the descent ended abruptly, an impact knocking the breath from my lungs. I gasped as I lay crumpled on a surface too smooth, too cold, barely illuminated by a flickering flicker that barely seemed to exist. The air was thick with the scent of rot and despair, and even here I could hear the murmurs, the nagging beckoning that punctured my consciousness. Rising to my feet, I could see I was no longer in the woods. This space felt almost sterile, funneling my panic into an overwhelming sense of curiosity. Dozens of parallel paths stretched out before me, each lined with more shadowy figures. They drifted silently, their motions detached, as if they were caught in an eternal loop of torment. Then, locked in a gate of bewilderment, I stepped forward. Each step resonated with unease, resonating off into the void with an echo that alternately reassured and horrified me. Just then, a sudden crash erupted from behind, a body colliding against one of the walls before slumping to the ground. My heart raced, for I recognized that face, twisted and broken from torment me own. Frozen in terror, I instinctively turned back, but the visage bore witness to another truth, another horror I now felt separating me from my humanity. The figure rose slowly, mirroring my every movement, inching closer with each echoing footfall, extending a skeletal hand toward me, fingers grasping air like vines reaching for daylight. Join us, it rasped, the sound hollow and echoing like wind through a cavern. You will never be alone again. A chilling foreboding filled the air as I backed away, glancing nervously at the maze of shadows around me. My reflections, the countless grotesque versions of myself, began to murmur, a crosshatch of voices whispering secrets, their bodies contorting with anticipation. Haziness filled my mind as I turned, the corridors twisted, dark paths obscured by dread. In a moment of blind panic, I charged forward, desperation fueling my escape. Each corner I turned, disembodied hands reached for me, clawing at my clothes and skin with icy, familiar fingers. Shadows stretched and recoiled, transforming the terrain into a nightmare as they tripped me with chains born of anguish. But as I stumbled deeper into the maze, through whispering chaos and riotous echoes, the floor beneath my feet trembled with purpose as a shriek erupted once more, louder this to me, a deafening roar that seemed to drown even my thoughts in an all-consuming despair. There was no escaping their presence, and as I ran, tears filled my eyes, the boundaries of reality crumbling. In that dreadful moment, I heard it again, a haunting voice rising above the din, promising what I feared more than anything. Join us forever. And then came a dreadful snap, and as the world collapsed around me, I felt the ground split underfoot, a chasm of unimaginable depth welcoming me home. I fell into darkness, feeling the weight of the beckoning shadow pull me down, 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 while behind me I heard something vastly worse than my own screams, delighted laughter, echoing through the void, his laughter. For I knew at that moment, deep within the abyss, the night would keep me, I was never to escape, a thought crashing through my mind as I was consumed by darkness. The darkness swallowed me whole, leaving no trace of light, but the air grew denser, pulsing with the intertwined breaths of restless souls. Somehow, amidst the oppressive absence of visibility, I felt time slipping through my fingers like grains of sand, each moment stretched taut with a shifting undercurrent of dread that I twisted and turned, searching for anything that could anchor me to the remnants of the world I once knew. The palpable fear, however, was punctuated by low whispers, each voice blending with the next, a murmur of promises wrapped in threats. You will find us, you will become us. In the oppressive silence that followed, a low, flickering glow appeared in the distance, rising like a beacon through the blackness. I was drawn to it, propelled by a mixture of hope and trepidation. The flame revealed itself to be a lantern, suspended midair, glowing with an unearthly light. Surely, this flickering would guide me out. As I approached, my heart began to thrash in my chest, the shadows seemed to shift and swirl around the lantern, vying for its luminosity. The dance of darkness became more frantic, and I could hear their whispers intensify, a chorus of wronged souls crying out for release. Come closer, the voice was different this time, sultry and enticing, wrapping around me like silk. My feet hesitated, but the lantern burned with an allure too tremendous to ignore. Reclaim what is yours. As I reached out toward the light, hands darted from the shadows, grasping at me. I felt their icy touch against my skin, dragging me further into their grasp, gasping for the air that no longer seemed to exist. A cacophony of voices erupted behind me, a feral chorus crying out for me to stay, each sound more agonized than the last, resonating with an unspoken fear. I tore my gaze away from the lantern, stumbling backward into the throng of shadows that watched like wolves, eager to taste my fear. The luminous heart of the lantern pulsed faster as I grappled with the terror of their stares, faceless, waiting, unyielding. Was the light a path to salvation or just another snare meant to entrap me? The shadows coiled around my legs, dragging me down as I kicked and fought. Their chill seeped into my bones, and for a moment, I felt the clarity of their pain. Memories began to flood my senses, images of those long-lost figures I recognized from the outside world, friends, and loved ones, now absorbed in this blighted realm, twisted and distorted. "Let them in," they cried, and my heart sank. I saw my mother's face, contorted with both anguish and pleasure, as she stepped forward, beckoning me closer. Each step she took melted away the barrier between our worlds, and as she stretched her hands toward me, I felt the warmth dissipate like smoke. "Join us, my sweet," her voice was the epitome of comfort, yet it gripped my heart with ice. "No!" I screamed, wrenching myself away from the enticement of her voice. The shadows writhed in agitation, screaming in unison, and my legs propelled me forward as I began to sprint toward the lantern, thinking that maybe, just maybe, the light would stave off the darkness. As I drew closer, I spotted something moving behind the glow. A face materialized, a shadow of a boy, his eyes wider than the abyss. There was a desperate longing etched on his features, and in that moment I caught a glimpse of myself in him, my own reflection twisted into a field of horror. The others clamored, voices mixing into a near-deafening shriek, "He will take you too. Don't trust him." But I pushed onward, feeling the lantern's warmth beckon, drowning out their protests until I was nearly there. Then, with a final, furious leap, I reached for the light. But as my fingers grazed its surface, the air trembled with an electric force, and the lantern flashed blindingly bright. Time fractured around me, and the entities around me shrieked, their screams morphing into something almost like laughter. The world shifted, and the shadows fell into chaos. Before I could process the ground beneath my feet, I felt an all-consuming pull. My body was being lifted, thrashing against an invisible tether. The boy's face twisted into a mask of anguish, pleading with me to recoil, yet my body betrayed reason, and I was swallowed whole by the radiance that erupted from the lantern. Suddenly, the warmth turned searing, clawing at my skin like hot iron, and I cried out only to realize my voice had vanished, consumed by the inferno around me. A million memories flashed, images of love and life, laughter and joy burned away until all that remained was me encapsulated in the dark that my vision swirled, mixing with shadows until everything was engulfed in an all-encompassing void, leaving me suspended in disbelief. The weight of existence slipped away, unraveling before me like a long-lost dream, and just as I accepted my fate, a distant sound reached my ears, the laughter, that chilling laughter once more. "Welcome back," it sang in unison, a chorus of loving shadows as the lantern flickered and fizzled behind me. With that, the ground snapped beneath my feet once more, the darkness erupting into chaos as I descended into an even deeper fell of despair, feeling a chorus of hands catch me, wrapping around my throat. This time, there was no escape left. The hands held me tightly, fingers creeping along my skin like spiders weaving a web of despair, but instead of pulling me into darkness, they thrust me back into a warped semblance of reality. I gasped, breathless and bewildered, and blinked against the blinding light radiating from the lantern, which now floated ethereally before me, its brightness casting unearthly shadows that twisted in grotesque formations. That I reeled backward, the shadows flanking me, whispering and hissing, demanding to be heard. "You should have joined us," they taunted, a cacophony of voices clamoring for my attention. I staggered, the ground squishing beneath my feet like mud, as I tried to regain my balance in this bizarre limbo. "Where am I?" I shouted, but my voice felt small, devoured by the enormity of the encroaching darkness. The boy's face flickered in and out of focus, like a fading star desperately trying to retain its glow. I squinted into the darkness where he had been, but he was gone. I felt an emptiness wash over me, an absence that echoed through the void, something crucial missing. As the lantern pulsed an insistent light, I turned my attention back to it, desperate for answers. It felt more than just a source of light. It resonated with the harmony of life, a heart beating in defiance of the encircling shadow. Taking a breath, I reached toward it once more. The spiraling shadows writhed and recoiled, their cacophony rising in pitch, a discordant plea woven through their cries. Leave now. They will take you. Racing against instinct, I felt compelled to abscond rather than embrace the beckoning light. My feet turned to flee, but as I did, the lantern flickered erratically, casting ephemeral images upon the ground, images of lives once lived, true souls ensnared within this reality. A family in a crimson house, children laughing, playing on the swing set that creaked against a weary breeze. A woman stood in the doorway, an ethereal light emanating from her, each smile more radiant than the last. Then it flickered to darkness, the joy overshadowed, wailing consumed their laughter, and those vibrant figures distorted into specters of despair. No. No. I cried, the rising darkness closing in fast. The shadows morphed, becoming more tangible, taking on shapes of those once cherished. Their faces twisted in agony, repairs crafted by the darkness that had now wrapped itself back around me. Join us, they whispered in unison, the warm emotions betraying me, concealing their malicious intent in the guise of love, and then I understood their souls were trapped here, forcing those they loved to endure this gloom-altered limbo, luring their kin into the darkness so they would never be truly alone. It was a betrayal soft as whispers yet ruthless as the grip of the grave. No. I screamed, stumbling into the cacophony as I felt their grasp tighten, the shadows suffocating me, dragging me back toward the lantern. The light pulsated with desperation, a stark contrast against the chilling touch that clung to my every limb. Suddenly, with a grotesque rush, the shadow figures fell back, as if repelled by an unseen force, retreating into the deeper darkness. A momentary breath of relief washed over me like an ebbing tide. I spun toward the lantern, heart pounding, desperate to understand the pull it had over me, but as I neared, the boy's silhouette emerged once more, eyes mirroring my own horror, shadowed by betrayal, or perhaps by revelation. You can't fight it, he called, voice barely a whisper amidst the rising chaos. They will find you again. You can't escape. Behind him, the shadows stirred, a swirling mass of despair as they began to reform, and I felt a gaping rift, an invitation to surrender to the darkness before me. My breath quickened, the realization of slipping away became dangerously tangible. I don't want to stay. I yelled back, anchoring myself against the doubt creeping into my heart. The boy stepped closer, the shadows swirling around him like smoke. You must choose. Soon there will be no time left. The ground beneath me fluttered as if it were alive, trembling with the weight of choices unseen. The lantern's glow intensified, illuminating the trapped souls, casting their anguished expressions like grotesque masks against the unnatural light. My heart raced, a vicious pulse urging me to either embrace the void or run, all while the shadows laughed, a guttural sound resonating in the fabric of my mind, reinforcing their call. Yet just as despair began to take hold, it happened again. The darkness shifted, with a bone-chilling snap, the shadowy figures surged back towards us, their motions frenzied and alien. The boy screamed, "Run! You have to run!" But before I could move, I felt the cold grip of hands wrapping around my throat once more, wrenching me back. I gasped as the boy was consumed by the swelling shadows, his form pulled into the yawning mouth of darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. No! I shouted, desperation surging within me as a part of me felt his absence, a severing finality that gripped my very soul with icy fingers. And just as the darkness enveloped us in a suffocating shroud, the lantern's light exploded, a dazzling brilliance illuminating silhouettes of tormented souls reaching out in pleading desperation, solidify the connection between our worlds one last time. As my vision began to fade, all surrounding me dissolved into chaos, a rush of shadows and screams, and as the last flicker of light extinguished, I felt myself falling once more, deeper into the abyss where only whispers dared to linger. An unholy chant crept into my ears as I plummeted into the unknown. You will become one of us. And with that chilling promise saturating the air around me, the last remaining fragments of my resolve shattered, leaving an inconceivable void behind. I awoke not to light but to a deeper shadow, an oppressive twilight that draped over me like a funeral shroud. The air was thick, almost liquid, pressing against my skin and swirling in perfumed whispers. It was a scent I recognized, a blend of decay and despair, sweet like the lingering echo of a forgotten lullaby. Dread coursed through me as I struggled to sit up, the ground beneath me shifting as if alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of something ancient and hungry. Staring into the abyss surrounding me, I saw not emptiness but a continuum of darkness, fragments of memory caught like drifting leaves in a swirling vortex. Faces flickered and faded, some twisted in laughter, others contorted in agony, each bearing a story forged in pain. A sudden surge of anger ignited within. I was trapped in a sepulchre of lost souls, and every last one was calling out for something: justice, peace, retribution. I grabbed onto the threads of my own memories, desperate to claw my way back to clarity. My name echoed in my mind, battered but stubborn, a last bastion against the rising tide of surreal horror: Evelyn. Evelyn. It shifted into a chant, a lullaby morphing into a lament. My throat constricted, and I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to block out the pervasive sound. Help us! Help us! Dread coiled tighter as the chant became a dirge, weaving and unraveling with sinister intent. Terror locked my muscles, but instinct had my legs propelling me forward. I stumbled across the undulating floor, the darkness beneath me whispering as if coaxing me to join their wretched procession. Venturing deeper into this twilight arena, the shadows separated into inklings of figures just beyond my peripheral vision. They flickered, distorted by an unseen force that refracted their true shapes and sizes, but their presence was undeniably a looming throng, waiting and watching in utter silence. In a sudden surge of clarity, I dashed toward a flickering light in the distance, independent of the darkness. The mere existence of that glow acted as a beacon, illuminating the teetering hope trapped within my despair. I pushed through the barriers of shadow, feeling the chill skimming my skin like ghostly fingers. The light intensified ahead, blooming like a flower amidst the deathly smog, but as I approached, my heart sank. The ethereal glow was pulsating from another lantern, suspended impossibly in the air, surrounded by swirling blackness. It shimmered in defiance, and a flickering illumination burst forth, revealing a horrific scene unfolding beneath it. A girl, no older than 10, knelt within a circle of shadows, her pale face smeared with drips of darkness that coursed from the depths, the shadows morphing to form nightmarish limbs reaching out, their talons scraping against her delicate skin. Her eyes, wide and welling with tears, reflected my very soul, a mirror of despair that twisted deep within me. No. I called out, gripping the fragile hope tightly in my chest, my voice trembling and raw. Get away from her. The shadows around her shifted violently, their grip tightening as silence slithered over the air, becoming oppressive and tangible. I felt the heartbeat of dread pulsate around me, matching the horrified rhythm of my own. Suddenly, an icy hand latched onto my ankle, dragging me backward. I yelped, twisting to escape, but shadows formed a wall behind me, a horde blocking the way. Their laughter sounded like shattered glass, as if 1,000 souls were suffocated within the jagged echoes of their existence. Join us. You cannot save her. You belong to us. They chanted in unison, voices slithering like worms burrowing under my flesh. No. I fought back, desperation fueling my resistance. The shadows clawed at my very being, their grasp a relentless grip of cold despair. I stumbled, falling to my knees, heart racing. Everything I knew began unraveling, the edges of my sanity fraying as their mocking laughter consumed all hope. Slowly rising, my eyes fixated on the girl, whose essence flickered like a dying star. I had to save her, there had to be a way. Summoning fragments of courage, I reached toward the lantern, my fingers tinged with shadows, brushing against the vibrancy of its light. But just as I grasped the lantern's handle, a surge of cold wind enveloped me, and the girl turned, locking eyes with me. Evelyn, she whispered, the air around us thickening with dread. You have to remember. The shadows recoiled, retreating into darkness, and just beyond their depths, a shadowy figure took form, a silhouette that bore a haunting familiarity. My heart plunged into the abyss of recognition. My hands trembled on the lantern, the weight of it shifting as time slipped away. Who are you? I gasped, but before the spectre could respond, the oppressive heaviness of shadow surged back with renewed fury. With every ounce of will, I swung the lantern in defiance, directing its light toward the encroaching darkness, but the scream of the girl pierced the air. You need to run. They're coming for you. And as the temperature plummeted, the shadows surged forward, and the chilling echo of 1,000 whispers surrounded me once again. I felt the very fabric of reality begin to tear. Evelyn, the malevolent chorus sang. Join us forever. I was left on the precipice of despair, plunging deeper into a world crafted from nightmares, and the last flicker of light threatened to vanish into the insatiable dark. I scrambled to my feet, panic straining against the fabric of my sanity. The pulsating shadows, a living mass of despair, coiled and writhed like an infected wound, encroaching as the girl's screams reverberated in my ears. Her plea etched itself into my heart, igniting a flame of urgency that pushed me into motion. Away from the beckoning darkness. As I ran, the cold breath of the shadows cascaded over my back, chilling me to the bone. I darted through the treacherous landscape, the lantern still clutched tightly in my hands as an act of defiance against the looming dread. With every step, it felt as if the darkness was reaching out, grasping for my ankles, pulling at the shadows cloaked around me, whispering promises of sweet release. Why are you running? The shadows slithered, their laughter entwining with the wind, a cacophony of tortured souls. You cannot escape what is yours. I deflected their words like stones, focusing instead on the flickering light that illuminated my path amidst the consuming gloom. I searched for a way out, but each turn I took brought me deeper into the convoluted maze of twilight, shadows coiling tighter around me like serpents hungry for their prey. As the light brightened, echoing the heartbeat of my own racing pulse, I stumbled into a clearing no larger than a patch of cursed earth among an infinite expanse of shadow. In the middle stood a grotesque figure draped in a robe of darkness, the edges absorbing the light. Its visage was obscured, but I could feel its presence, a suffocating weight that loomed like impending doom. Evelyn, it crooned, voice smooth as silk but edged with malice. At last, you have come to embrace your fate. I opened my mouth to protest, but the air left my lungs as I took a step back. There, trapped within a cage woven from shadow, were countless faces, those of the tortured, the lost. Their expressions carved with agony, mouths routing silent screams. The girl from moments before had disappeared, merged among them. Help us, she had called to me, but the darkness had taken her, and now she was just another lament in a chorus of despair. A familiarity prickled at the edges of my mind as I regarded the countenance of the figure before me. I knew it. Had I seen it before, or was it a figment of my fading memory? What do you want? I shouted, my voice breaking against the weight of despair. The figure tilted its head, an unervingly graceful movement. What do you think? Your essence is required for eternal peace. You were meant to join us, Evelyn. Carry forth the legacy of our pain. No. I shouted, the desperation clawing at my throat. I won't give in. I won't become one of you. A twist of rage flickered within the figure, and the shadows surged forward, choking the air with the malodorous scent of despair, filling my lungs with the stench of lost hope. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, like a drum summoning their relentless thrum. Frantically, I swung the lantern toward the masses, its light wavering but resilient. Stay back! I cried, and for a moment, it stopped. The shadows hesitated, recoiling as if scorched by the light, but then a ripple of defiance surged through them. The shadows whispered my Namino, roared it. Evelyn! You cannot escape. You are us. Suddenly, something sharp and searing jolted through my chest. A memory long buried resurfaced, unraveling the threads of my thoughts and tying me back to the malicious enchantment of this cursed twilight. A vis Iona scene replaying in brutal clarity, a car spinning out of control, tires screaming against the asphalt, the sensation of helplessness as the world blurred and shattered into darkness. With that haunting memory came clarity, understanding of my entrapment. I had not merely stumbled into this realm, I had invited it in. A shadow of guilt weighed heavier than the shadows surrounding me. I'm sorry, I whispered, more to myself than to them. I didn't mean to. The figure laughed softly, a pitiful sound drenched in the echoes of forsaken souls. Sorrow is your currency now. Time to pay your debt. With a horrific lurch, the ground trembled beneath me. The faces in the darkness squirmed and twisted, some reaching out imploring Liathers, snapping their jaws hungrily, desperate for release, illustrating the torment that had brought me here, that had drawn every anguished soul into this confounding fate. But just as despair threatened to seize me completely, the lantern emitted a fierce pulse of light, cutting through the encroaching blackness, and from the heart of the shadows, a scream ripped through the fabric of reality. You cannot resist forever. We will claim you. I turned to run, my heart pounding as I dashed back toward the glimmering light beyond the clearing, desperate to flee this nightmare. But just as I reached the edge, the shadows surged with such ferocity that they engulfed me, leaving me trapped in a writhing mass where every face was familiar, crowded with torment, longing, anguish. Then slowly, against the chaos, a voice broke through the din of whispers, a low, haunting croon that resonated deep within the marrow of my bones. Evelyn, it's time to choose. Embrace the shadows or step into the light. That I saw the lantern flicker, and the moment hung heavy before me, heavy as a curtain waiting to fall. And then, in the chilling embrace of despair, the landscape shimmered and wavered, the darkness coiling around me like a predator preparing to feast. The shadows surged closer, now fully materialized, waiting for my decision as my own reflection stared maddeningly back from the depths. The ground beneath me began to tremble, and in the heart of the shadows, a tempest brewed. I was surrounded by echoes of every choice I had ever made, and I felt a clawing sensation, insistent and demanding, beckoning me to surrender, and then, just as I began to choose, a deafening crack echoed through the air. The very fabric of the throbbing shadows split, revealing a grotesque maw of light voraciously opening as the world around me began to collapse. In that instant, the darkness screeched a wailing terror that pierced through to my soul. I understood now. It was not only a struggle for life or death, but a fight against becoming one with the forgotten echoes of nightmares, and as the light surged forth, swallowing everything in its path, I felt myself being drawn into its luminance, the boundary between salvation and surrender growing dangerously thin. The shadows screamed my name, a symphony of haunting despair echoing louder and louder, drowning in the tempest of chaos. The last thing I saw was the girl, her hands reaching out in desperation, lips forming a single word as the world fell apart around us. Evelyn. And then, just before I reached the edge, the chasm opened wide, revealing a horrifying truth that left me gasping, teetering on the brink of my own darkness. The light engulfed me, a blazing inferno entwined with the piercing shrieks of the shadows. For a fleeting heartbeat, I was weightless, suspended in a moment that sprawled like an eternity, poised between realms of shadow and light. But like a ravenous predator, the darkness yanked me back, a force so unrelenting I felt my very soul being dragged, clawed, and pulled by its grasp that I landed hard, unceremoniously thrust back into the nightmarish world I had only just been attempting to escape. Groaning, pain erupted through my limbs, as I struggled to regain my senses amidst the disarray. The lantern lay nearby, its flicker struggling to illuminate my surroundings, but the shadows circled around, becoming opaque tendrils that crept closer. "Welcome back, Evelyn," crooned a voice layered with venomous delight. It was the figure again, now seemingly more corporeal, stepping from the mass of darkness. Shadows unfurled from its form as it took measured steps towards me. I stumbled back, heart racing at the realization that in my vulnerability lay their power. "What do you want from me?" I rasped, desperately scanning for the girl, the faces of the lost, but they had vanished into the abyssal void, leaving me isolated amidst swirling despair. The figure smiled a smile that twisted the very essence of horror into something intimately personal. "What you owe us. The choice was made before you even entered this realm. But now, the stakes have risen," the shadows quivered, responding with a cacophony of whispers, punctuated by the unearthly wails of the tortured souls within their depths. "Join us, Evelyn, join us." Each syllable bore down on me, pressing like boulders, cascading through my veins with an icy dread that froze my thoughts. A sudden sensation seized my heart, a pulsing rhythm echoing in unforgiving tempo, a reminder of desperation woven tightly around my memories. It wasn't merely a trap, it was a reflection of my own wrath against the terrible truth I had long buried. I had forsaken the lives of others, including the girl I failed to save, and now their agony was my companion. As I stood lost and trembling, the lantern flickered again, a final bastion of light against the onslaught of doom. "Evelyn," the figure mocked, "hold on to that light if you like. It will burn out soon enough, words failed me. All I could muster were fragmented gasps of horror as the ground trembled and shuddered beneath my feet. With every pulse of the shadows, I felt the weight of my misdeeds claiming me, a titanic sorrow that loomed ever closer. I had hurled myself into a starless void, pouring my guilt into this land of horror. The silhouetted girl suddenly materialized at the edge of the clearing, her expression hollow, a ghost of what she once was, a mere imprint of hope. "Help me, Evelyn," she called, the plea twisting into agony, reverberating like an echo through time. No. I screamed, but the figure laughed, the sound a grotesque symphony that conjured phantom tendrils to lurch forward, reaching for the girl. She widened her eyes, the shadows beginning to snare her limbs, her mouth opening in a silent scream, a reflection of my OWN. "I will save you." I lunged toward her, but invisible chains yanked me back. Pain lashed through me, the echoes of the myriad souls grasping at my sanity. Every anguished scream melded into the whispers of my own failures, trapping me under their weight. "Your salvation lies not in the light, but in the darkness," the figure said, twisting its body with sinister grace. "Embrace your fate, and perhaps you may yet save the girl from her torment." In that moment of hesitation, an intoxicating shift coursed through me, a seductive promise of power ensnared my thoughts, the notion that maybe, just maybe, darkness held the key to salvation. If I could understand the shadows, could I harness them? But as I stood warring against my own morality, the shadows rushed around me, tightening their grip and pulling me further into the abyss. The girl's form flickered before me, and I was seized by a Visiona board game infused with dread, a setup of red cards, detailing each sacrifice I had to make to secure a path to her safety. And within that moment of guidance, I saw the faces of those I had lost reflected in the obsidian void, tearing at my resolve. Each one was a part of my stained legacy, whispering that my choices would redefine not only my fate but the realm itself. As the tempest swirled around us, I made my decision, one that would alter the very fabric of this nightmare. "I will not choose," I shouted into the chaos, my voice breaking over the dizzying sound of shadows. "I will not give in." But just as I prepared to clench the lantern, a shriek erupted, a wave of anguish radiating from the cage of souls, reverberating like a warning that echoed deep within me. The light flickered uncertainly. Suddenly, the ground split open beneath the girl, shadow tendrils grasping her, pulling her toward the maw of darkness, her frantic eyes beseeching me for help. "Evelyn!" she screamed, and my heart shattered as I inched closer, pleading, desperate to bridge the abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. With a final, anguished cry, the darkness enveloped her completely, and I stood frozen, transformed into a mere ghost of my former self, forced to witness everything I had failed to save. And in that breathtaking instant before the void closed, I glimpsed the girl grinning, not in relief, but with a sinister, knowing expression, one that mirrored the figure's glee, suggesting that surrender was the only path forward. Just as reality began to collapse and the shadows reached forth to capture my mind, the unthinkable happened. I felt a frigid hand grip my shoulder, and the world spun into an uncharted void of darkness. And there, nestled in the shadows, I saw it, my own reflection, twisted and desolate, a grotesque version swathed in the relentless grasp of despair, inviting me to join the dance of torment. The chilling air thickened as the memories fused with the present, pulling me deeper into the nightmare where each decision spiraled into a heartless cycle, a hidden truth resonating just beyond reach, while laughter echoed endlessly in the void. "Your turn, Evelyn." The darkness receded but did not vanish, settling around me like a worn cloak. I felt its suffocating weight as echoes of laughter drifting, taunting, and haunting lingered in my ears. Somehow, I had returned to the twisted labyrinth, but something was different. An unholy familiarity stained the atmosphere, and I realized the insatiable shadows wrapped themselves more intimately around me, almost as if they were partners in a malevolent waltz. Straining against the smothering terror, I felt the flicker of the lantern pulsate weakly in my grip. Every heartbeat thrummed in response, rippling through the dimness like a fragile thread tethering me to light. As I ventured deeper into the maze, memories swayed before me like twisted phantoms, each murmuring in riddles, speaking of loss and choices long since forgotten. Each pair of eyes glimmered with a reflection of grief, mine, and that of all who fell before me. "Evelyn," they beckoned, their pleas a haunting lullaby. "Come play with us." We need you. Horror gripped me. Were those the lost souls, drawn into this damnation, waiting for a savior or a savagery? The thought clawed at my sanity, and with every whispered name, my heart sank deeper until I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or reliving moments long buried. As I pressed forward, the maze began to morph, revealing a series of doorways flickering along the walls like dying stars. The shadows pulsed, drawing me nearer to an ominous door draped in darkness that seemed to hum with anticipation. I approached it cautiously, knowing full well the countless warnings flashing through my mind. Some places were never meant to be opened. My pulse quickened as I grasped the cold handle. You shouldn't have come here, the shadows whispered, echoing my past mistakes, but I pushed through. With a deep breath, I twisted the handle and threw open the door. Inside, an expanse of swirling nebulas greeted me, beautiful and terrifying, a vortex filled with the souls of the lost swirling endlessly, faces emerging and dissolving, twisting into horrific shapes. In the center stood a reflection of myself, as if I were staring into a nightmare unraveling. But this version of me wore a triumphant smile, eyes aglow with unholy glee. I was taken aback as the darkness illuminated the truth wrapped in illusion. Welcome to your true form, Evelyn, the apparition laughed, a sound like glass shattering amid a cacophony of sorrow. You see, you've always belonged here, just like all the others. You, my dear, are part of the darkness. No. I gasped, recoiling in horror, shaking my head to expel the vision. But the more I fought, the louder the laughter grew, an addictive melody weaving through the air, a hymn of despair tinged with ecstasy. A shadow surged, engulfing me as I fell. You can't escape your destiny. This is where you'll find peace. It gripped my limbs, pulling me into the vortex, and the cacophony of laughter reached a feverish pitch. Desperation clawed at my sanity. The weight of the truth forced me to grapple with the reflection of myself that I deeply feared, a corrupted spirit intertwined with the shadows, reveling in the anguish of others, no redeeming light to guide me home. But amidst the overwhelming terror, clarity began to rise in my soul, a flicker of resistance igniting. I want surrender. I refuse to be a part of this. I cried out defiantly, striking against the dark. The shadows hesitated, recoiling from my will, the truth clawing at the edges of reality as I wrestled against the tide. Clusters of faces swirled around me, soft whispers rising into a chilling crescendo, calling my name, urging me to embrace the bleakness. Join us. Join us, Evelyn. The choice is yours. In that moment, I felt an understanding sift through me. His evil did not just want me to become one of them, it hungered to settle in the gaps of my soul, tearing from my very being the remnants of hope, to rend the essence of me into darkness itself. No more. I screamed, voice fragile yet fierce. I clutched the lantern, feeling its warmth seep back into my palms, reminding me of another truth, the light that fought against the encroaching night. With every ounce of strength left within me, I turned toward the swirling mass of despair, raising the lantern high. You have no power over me. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked, howling in rage as I thrust the lantern forward. The swirling shadows bucked, spiraling away from the devastation of the light. An explosion radiated from the lantern, a warmth igniting my veins, shattering the darkness and illuminating the deep abyss around me. As the shadows recoiled, terror rang in their voices, a cacophony of anger, despair, and betrayal. I will not join you, I proclaimed, forcing the lantern's glow deeper into the fray. And as I advanced, the shadows began to dissipate, their forms folding and crumbling like ash against an unrelenting fire. Faces twisted with rage and longing began to disappear, the darkness clawing at them as they fell into emptiness. But even as I fought back, a sly echo snaked through the fading darkness, a voice slicing through the chaos. You think you've won, little one. You can imprison the darkness, but it will always linger. For within you lies the seed of despair, waiting to bloom. You know you cannot escape it forever. Just as the last vestiges of darkness dissipated, I stumbled, suddenly suspended between worlds, so much confusion storming within me. The white light spiraled, illuminating the prison I had left behind, as if casting back to reveal the shreds of reality I had tried so desperately to escape. When I finally came to my senses, I awoke on the forest floor, my heart racing as the sun broke through the canopy, dissolving shadows lingering in its wake. Breathless, I sat up, grasping the dew-spattered grass, instinctively reaching for the lantern that now lay shattered beside me, but the triumphant sensation of salvation fell heavy in my chest as a truth seeped through the damning silence. The whispers still echoed in my mind. At that moment, as the light graced my skin, I caught a reflection in the shattered lantern pieces and wept for the truth I had tried to deny. A corner of my lips twisted into a smile that did not belong to me, masked in the darkness of all I had faced. The lingering scar of the shadows remained, a whisper of who I had been, and who I would become. As I rose to leave the cursed forest behind, a ghost of laughter wound through the trees like a last embrace. It sent chills racing down my spine, morphing into a deep-seated dread, for no matter how far I ran, I knew the truth. I would always carry their darkness in every step, in every breath, in every heartbeat. And silently, their laughter lingered, whispering promises that would forever echo in the void. There will always be a next time, for evil is merely sleeping beneath your skin.